The village of Whispering Waves clung to the edge of the world. It was a place where the sea met the sky in a hazy blur. The salt spray kissed the weathered houses, turning them a pale, ghostly gray. The villagers were a hardy bunch, their lives intertwined with the moods of the ocean. They fished its depths and told tales of its mysteries. The rhythmic crashing of waves was the village's heartbeat. It was a constant reminder of the sea's awesome power. The salty air carried the scent of seaweed and brine. It was a smell that permeated everything, a reminder of the village's connection to the water. The cries of gulls filled the air, a chorus that echoed the village's own stories. Life in Whispering Waves was simple, governed by the tides and the whispers of the wind. But beneath the surface of this quiet existence, a legend lurked. It was a tale passed down through generations, a story that sent shivers down the spines of even the bravest sailors. It was the legend of the Wraith's lantern. They said it appeared on nights when the moon hid its face, a spectral light bobbing gently on the surface of the water. It was an eerie greenish glow that seemed to pulse with an unnatural life. Some dismissed it as mere phosphorescence, a trick of the light on the waves. But others knew better. They knew it was the Wraith's lantern. The legend spoke of a ghostly ship, lost at sea centuries ago. It was a vessel laden with gold, caught in a terrible storm. The ship, they said, was dragged down to the depths by a malevolent entity. Now, the lost souls aboard the ship sought restitution. They lured unsuspecting sailors with the Wraith's lantern, dragging them down to a watery grave. Old Man Elias knew the legend better than anyone. His eyes, the color of the sea itself, held a depth of knowledge that came from a lifetime spent on the water. He was a man of few words, his face etched with wrinkles that spoke of long hours under the sun and the salty wind. Elias had seen the Wraith's lantern. He wouldn't speak of it, not to anyone. But sometimes, late at night, when the wind howled like a banshee, he would wake up screaming. His nightmares were haunted by a ghostly green light and the chilling whisper of the sea. Mira was different. She was a young girl with a thirst for adventure that burned brighter than the oil lamps that lit the village at night. Her eyes, the color of the summer sky, held a spark of curiosity that refused to be extinguished. She listened to the whispers of the wind and the tales of the sea with a heart full of wonder. The legend of the Wraith's lantern fascinated her. She wasn't afraid. She was drawn to the mystery of it all. She wanted to see the light for herself. She wanted to know the truth. One night, when the moon was hidden behind a curtain of clouds and the fog hung heavy in the air, Mira made a decision. She would find the Wraith's lantern. Section 5. The fog rolls in. The fog was thick that night. It rolled in from the sea like a phantom, blanketing the village in a damp, eerie silence. The air was heavy with the smell of salt and the promise of rain. The only sound was the mournful cry of the gulls as they circled overhead. Mira crept out of her house. She moved silently, her bare feet barely making a sound on the cobblestone streets. She made her way down to the docks, her heart pounding in her chest. The fishing boats bobbed gently in the water, their outlines barely visible in the fog. Mira untied her father's smallest boat. She pushed it off the dock and climbed in, picking up the oars. Section 6. A glimmer in the mist. The small boat cut through the water, the silence broken only by the gentle splashing of the oars. The fog was so thick Mira could barely see a few feet in front of her. She shivered, pulling her shawl tighter around her shoulders, but she wasn't afraid. Not really. She was excited. This was it. This was the adventure she had been waiting for. She rowed for what felt like hours. The fog showed no sign of lifting. Just as Mira began to doubt her own sanity, she saw it, a faint glimmer of light in the distance, a greenish glow that seemed to pulsate in the darkness. Section 7. The Wraith's Whisper. The light drew her in. It was like a moth to a flame. Mira rode towards it, her heart pounding in her chest. As she got closer, the light grew brighter. She could make out the shape of a lantern, bobbing gently on the surface of the water. But there was no ship, no sign of any vessel that could be carrying it, and then she heard it, a voice, a whisper carried on the wind. It was low and guttural, ancient and full of sorrow. It seemed to come from the depths of the ocean itself. "Restitution," the voice whispered. "You owe us. Restitution for a promise broken." Section 8. A Promise Forgotten. Mira stopped rowing. She stared at the lantern, her breath catching in her throat. The voice sent shivers down her spine. It was a voice filled with sadness and anger, a voice that spoke of ancient wrongs and a debt unpaid. What promise, Mira wondered? What had the village of Whispering Waves done to anger the sea so? The light pulsed as if in answer to her question. The whisper came again, closer this time, sending a chill down Mira's spine. "Remember," it hissed. "Remember the pact." And then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, the light vanished. The fog seemed to press in on Mira, suffocating her. She was alone. Section 9. The Village and Its Debt. Mira turned the boat around. She rowed back towards the village, her mind racing. The fog seemed to cling to her, a physical manifestation of her fear. She couldn't shake the feeling that she had stumbled upon something ancient and terrible. She found her way back to the docks, her body trembling with exhaustion and fear. She stumbled ashore, the image of the lantern seared into her mind. She knew she had to tell someone what she had seen. She needed answers. She found Old Man Elias sitting on a bench, staring out at the sea. He looked up as she approached, his eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and dread. "You saw it," he said, his voice barely a whisper. It wasn't a question. In Section 10, The Lantern Still Burns. Mira told him everything about the light, the voice, the promise. Elias listened patiently, his face etched with a mixture of sadness and resignation. When she was finished, he sighed. "The village has forgotten," he said, his voice heavy with sorrow. "But the sea remembers." He told her about an ancient pact, a deal struck between the village founders and a powerful sea witch. They had promised her something in return for safe passage and bountiful fishing. But they had broken their promise, and now the sea demanded restitution. Mira returned to her life, but she was forever changed. The memory of the Wraith's lantern haunted her dreams. The village of Whispering Waves continued to exist, seemingly untouched by its dark history. But the lantern still burned, a constant reminder of the debt that remained unpaid, and the sea waited, patiently, for the village to remember its promise.